I just am having so much fun this week bringing on my various co-hosts because they're all in such good moods. Jeff, are you in a pretty good mood this week?
Yeah, it's been a good week for sure on a number of different fronts. Good to see you, Randy.
Nice to see you as well. Listen, let's jump into this one. Biggest news maybe of the day in the Tesla world was this from Liuwen, Liuwen underscore 52. He says Tesla, according to the latest news from the Chinese investment institution Tianfeng Securities, Tesla may be cooperating with Chinese OEMs on FSD and robotaxi in China market. Tesla has held two rounds of negotiations with SAIC and has held talks with Geely. What did you think when you saw that?
Yeah, it fits a number of the things that we've heard previously around Elon and wanting to work with players that are serious in EV and have serious volume. And SAIC and Geely, they definitely do. They're definitely serious about it. And, China is serious about EV. So you think about you're going to invest resources in your company to license something out. You want it to have a great return. And the way it's going to have a great return is that the player you're working with is high volume and willing to work. And you've seen a number of these CEOs from China parade into the United States over the last 6 to 9 months since FSD has gone end-to-end neural net, and they've been trying it themselves. And maybe on your show, Randy, and other conversations I've had, I try to describe what's happening at the kind of the C level in these companies, and they're all many of them are running their own self-driving development program. They're taking different approaches, and they're spending money. Some of them have very public and excruciatingly difficult burn rates. Some of them have those burn rates, but have this cloud of like, oh, we're out there. We've got robo taxis. We're shipping. Everybody look at us.
Yeah.
But the financials are just absolute trash. And all these companies in these boardrooms, they both have to be looking like, do I have a technological solution that can scale just in unit volume? And then do I have something that can get the profitability? And at what point does it get the profitability? It's almost like they've been pushing this, like taking the heel of their shoe and pushing this prototype out the door. And Tesla started with the production solution at the production cost level and said, I'm going to spend about $1,200 on each vehicle, and I have to make this work, and it has to be global. So Tesla started with the production solution and worked backwards. And my theory is that's where we're going to land. And you're going to see many of these companies, they either take a license or they almost cease to exist once this comes out. And so these are multi-year decisions, and it's going to take the Chinese will move faster. They'll make the decision faster, and they'll integrate faster than American companies. And by the way, that's the same as it goes for other industries like smartphone, tablet, and others, wearables. So I actually, who knows if there's truth to this? I posted like if true,
Yeah.
it's a big deal. But if it does make sense. It does check a lot of the boxes. And again, Tesla's first order of business is deploying their own FSD in China, which I believe that they're on track for in the first half of 2025. But soon after, there's no reason why they can't start working from a license perspective and working with partners.
Yeah. And Brian Wong has been talking for months now about the fact that Baidu and there's another robotaxi company over there. They're looking for volume. They're looking for big numbers. They want to be in the game. They want to be first. They want to be, the leader. And I would assume that they would be perfectly happy to get some of their cars from Tesla, some of their cars from SAIC, some from Geely. Um, uh, have you been following these companies as well, or just like me through Brian? Uh-oh, your volume, your volume, your volume. We lost you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I've been following it, China has automakers that have full self-driving programs, and then they have tech companies working on full self-driving that don't have auto programs, kind of like in the U.S. as well. There's similar
Right.
examples. So yeah, And there's nothing more powerful from a cost perspective and a sourcing perspective is the ability to dual source and have multiple solutions. The China government would want obviously their own solutions. So there's a lot of this is gonna not gonna be a winner take all, but it could be a winner take most
Mhm.
situation. And I just think there's going to be tremendous volume behind this. And again, Tesla's been building the system for scale. And well, like I see a lot of these analysts with like a very simplistic approach of like, well, they're shipping something, like there must be ahead. Like, well, no, that's not the race. That's a different race. Tesla could have pushed something out and gotten it to work on 5 streets in San Francisco too
Right.
earlier, but that's not the race that they're running. So so yeah, I could see China wanting to multi-source this. I can see multiple solutions. I can see multiple companies wanting to partner with Tesla. So it's a high volume EV market. It makes a lot of sense. The U.S. is not overly serious about EV yet.
Mhm.
I think though, in terms of other partners outside of China, I think Hyundai would be interesting.
Right.
They've gotten very serious about EV. Good relationship with Tesla. Good relationship with the CEO. There's other partners. There's potentially VW. I mean, there's other partners, but you want a company that is serious about EV and has a good 3 to 5 year trajectory to not be bankrupt.
So you mentioned VW. They just finalized apparently their agreement with Rivian and said they're going to spend $2 billion on something, I guess, FSD and or operating system related. Does this make sense when they could just be in negotiations with Tesla to get
You know,
something
it
done?
it sounds like they're working with Rivian on the electrical architecture for EV. It doesn't sound like they're depending on Rivian for full self-driving. Maybe I've misread that, but it doesn't
Yeah, it's
sound
hard
to
to
me that
tell. It's
they're.
hard to tell. Mhm.
Yeah, it seems like it's more of on the electrical module subsystem and software, like that whole experience inside of the EV and power management. That's all very important. That's very valuable. So I can see why they're partnering with Rivian because they've got a pretty good approach. But what Rivian doesn't have is that other. If you get inside of your Tesla today, you have a processor that's running all the infotainment, all the voice to text, everything, in the vehicle. That's the AMD solution. That's what's running the vehicle. But the actual self-driving computer, which has dual redundancy, that's the computer that's designed by Tesla. It's the inference chip and it's all the surrounding circuitry and the motherboard around it. And that's what Tesla has developed from the ground up. That's a Tesla solution. So, so in terms of VW and Rivian, that partnership, Rivian has Rivian is attempting to do various rudimentary things from a self-driving perspective, but in terms of this end-to-end neural net processing, videoing controls out, I don't think they're anywhere on that to my knowledge. And I do, and from their recent commentary, it sounds like they're almost waiting for a partner to like, back to that make versus buy conversation. It sounds like it's something they're going to buy and partner with versus develop organically, but we'll see.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, maybe even last week, we talked about this a little bit. I've been talking for at least 2 weeks about 2025 and 2026 and what that looks like in terms of EPS and what it looks like in terms of maybe next year's year-end price target. Since then, we've had everybody, a whole list of people come out with their 2025 and even some 2026 estimates and some price targets for the end of next year. And now there's kind of a range of the serious players, and that range might be as low as 300 for Goldman. It might be in the 400-500s for Dan Ives, 600 this morning for AJ, 700 for me, Brian White. I'm sorry, Brian Wong at 1,000. I'm looking at 425 EPS for the 25 and maybe double that for 26. Not most people that have said anything about it are not that far off of that number. Where in all of that are you right now? Have you done any, specific homework on that?
A little bit, but what I think in the next 2 years, you're going to see the widest variation in targets, and you're going to see you're going to see some really big misses. I think that, potentially to either side. This is not a company where you can just count how many cars they're going to ship,
Yeah.
and then all the variation you have to worry about is just ASP and volume. This is a whole new ball game with energy, with FSD revenue, with potentially robotaxi revenue coming in, with licensing agreements we just talked about, and supercharger. All the sources of revenue for the company have grown immensely, and on the regulatory front too. The zero emission credits, those are going to continue. Those may actually ramp up even further.
Right.
Remember, a lot of these come from states. Trump is not the president of states; he's the
Right.
president of the United States. And then a lot of these, ZEV credits, their origins are from Canada, European Union. Their restrictions are even growing. And if the restrictions are growing and the volume of EV production is not meaningfully, they're not adding a lot of capacity. A lot of automakers did their initial splash and said, "All right, we're going to make something," and they've consumed some of the available market of EVs. They pumped a bunch of stuff into inventory, but they're not following up in mass volume. They're not going from 200K a year to 500K to a million to 2 million. They're not, outside of a couple of players like Hyundai and of course the Chinese players. A lot of people aren't adding volume, so I think the income and of course the high margins from regulatory credits are going to continue in the following year, and significantly. And then you've talked about this a lot, Randy, just their battery production business. I think Tesla put the brakes on a lot of things, whether it was Mexico or other locations, and they're trying to bring in battery production and car production. If it's for the U.S. market, they're going to do it in the United States.
Mhm.
And we know they're increasing in Berlin. We know they're increasing in China. So I think this year is going to be very, very difficult to call. But I would definitely be. I don't have a price target per se because the market is extremely irrational. I know it's fun to put a number out there. I
Sure,
think it's
sure.
going to be higher than where it is today for sure. But the you know I think the market is definitely getting set up for what's next. It was definitely awakened with the election of like, wow, this overhang's been eliminated. And not only was the overhang of like, will the government come down on the CEO of the company and come down on the company itself, but it's the actual reverse. Like it seems like they're unburdened, to use a
Right.
term. And um and it's almost like it's going the opposite direction. And there's been rocket fuel poured, into this thing. And we just don't know we just don't know where the sky is because we don't know where the limit is on this because the company is way beyond the point. If you look at the last two elections, even 2020, 2016, and what the company was building and what their sources of revenue were then, and how much did it matter, like who the president was? It didn't really matter as much. And now, when you've got these major transitions happening with a robotaxi, with Optimus, you really need that ability to work and influence government. So anyway, this should be interesting. And not only does Elon have outsized influence in the United States,
Mhm.
these world leaders all over, even before this election, he already had outsized influence. And now those world leaders know that he's traveling with the president. He's probably like, arguably, one of the top three most important people in politics in the world. And that also has outsized influence on his ability to negotiate on behalf of Tesla and to move things forward. So I this one's going to be hard to. I think the next couple of years are going to be very, very difficult
Yeah,
to be accurate on.
I did, set up my 2026 analysis by saying it's impossible to know. There's no way anybody has a clue. Maybe Elon has a theory about how many robotaxis he thinks might be deployed in 2026. Maybe he has a theory about how many Optimi he might deploy in 2026 and what he's going to sell them for. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So I feel like I've asked you this question before, but it's almost certainly the most important driver of future earnings. And it is about Optimus. And I'm going to break it down into three pieces. Number one, what percentage likelihood do you give of a significant ramp of Optimus in 2026 with sales to third parties? Is it, 50, 100, 75, 25%? What percent is you think it's a done deal, it's just going to happen? Number two, one can make the argument that the demand will be through the roof and the supply will be way lower than the demand based on pricing policies we've seen Tesla adopt in the past. Do you think they're going to try to get $50,000 a year in rent because they can? Or do you think that they'll have some kind of a nicer price point when they won't need it because it'll be worth so much more than that? And then three, based on your lifetime of experience, won't these ramps, the Optimus ramp multiple times faster than the cars?
Yeah. Um, Great questions. I'll start with the ramp. I'm getting a lot of calls on this too, and a lot of questions are coming in. A lot of people that study this believe the ramp up of an Optimus is going to be kind of the closest brethren to that is going to be the smartphone and tablet,
Hmm.
and kind of the it's kind of a build up from there versus you're building an automobile and you're trying to miniaturize that. It's because it's mostly this microelectronics
Right.
and the mechanics. And I will tell you that a lot of the supply chain for humanoids is really super underdeveloped. And it's very nuanced. There's some people that think like, well, yeah, that supplier in China is making actuators, and that supplier in Mexico, that supplier is doing that. But then when you go look into the details and you go look at the capability of what they're building, and whether it's the reliability or whether it's the degrees of freedom or whether it's the materials that are being used, you'll find out that that supply chain for what Optimus is going to be versus what the supply chain is today really don't exist.
Mhm.
So there's going to need to be some work on the industrialization of the supply chain, whether that supply chain's inside of Tesla or outside of Tesla. Tesla resources are going to have to work on that industrialization. They have a team that actually does that inside of Tesla. So I think though once Optimus is ramping, the part count, the assembly time, all those are going to be, much, much lower than a vehicle. So that's good. The process time will be lower. But where the complexity comes in manufacturing is not just looking at raw part count and raw assembly time and the ability to, to test it. It's also looking at the relative density of componentry relative to the packaging of the object.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's why smartphones are actually, and some of the better smartphones in the world are actually quite difficult. There's a lot of, um, anyway, I don't want to get too far off track, but Optimus is going to be quite dense from a packaging perspective, and therein lies where a lot of the complexity is, whether it's the actuator movement or whether it's some of the processes that are going to be used in manufacturing. But I do think we'll overcome this, and I do think that there's going to be classes, just like there are classes of smartphones. There's going to be these very, very highly capable humanoid robots, and then there's going to be others. And I think Tesla's going, they're kind of swinging for the fence with Optimus.
Mhm.
And at the same time, they're such a mature company, and they know they can't design in components like unobtainium. We used to call them
Right.
unobtainium in terms of material. We know that we can't do that. We have to develop a supply chain that we have line of sight to. So long story short, I think the production times, I think it will be good once it's at scale, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time to do it. But then we do ensuing versions, they should ramp faster than a vehicle, but that first one's going to take a bit of time. Now in 25, I think Tesla's going to here's the way it's going to work. Tesla's going to do thousands internally
Mhm.
and then do many thousands internally. And while they're doing that many thousands, they may start seeding other external partners with product. But there's always going to be this phase differential of Tesla and ramping Optimus internally for internal use. And then it'll push to the right a little bit. And then there'll be this ramp for everyone else. And I think it will start with an industrial Optimus only, and then eventually, a few years later, there'll be Optimus for the home.
Right.
But anyway, I think I answered the Optimus questions, but you had a number of questions in
Well,
there.
so then the second part was the how much they're going to charge for it. So we've seen them like on energy storage. It feels like they could charge a lot more for these uh, 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 battery megapacks than they do. I recognize, having sold to things like utilities in the past, that you don't want to burn the bridge by overcharging. But with Optimus, that problem doesn't. I don't see that being a problem because the TAM is so massive, and the demand will be so dramatic from everybody that's in industry or in distribution or even retail. So, do you think they'll try to do more of an NVIDIA, with 70-80% margins if they can get it?
Yeah, I think it will be high margin because it's not going to be just a hardware offering they're shipping. It's going to be the software piece of it, which is one of the reasons NVIDIA is such high margin. So I do think it will be high margin. Tesla doesn't have to give away Optimus. The TAM is going to be so large for the next decade. Tesla doesn't need the whole market either. So this is a when you create these new categories, um, you have pricing, you have inherent pricing power that just others don't have. Apple, they can move upward, they can move their price of their product up or down. Now, $100 or so. Now there is some sensitivity. I mean, they are seeing some movement, but at the end of the day, they're shipping 90 million phones in a quarter. And maybe that'll flex up and down here or there, but they have a bit of pricing power. This will be on a different level. These are going to be closer to the cost of a small vehicle. But I think the payment plans are going to be different. And the other thing, that when people buy these, they're going to be getting, instant monthly ROI.
Yeah.
Like if you
It's
replace a person with an Optimus, you're not, so the payback is going to be interesting. And I think like with Robotaxi, Tesla's going to have to, come up with a fairly unique approach to seed these things out there. But anyway, I think the demand is going to be so large. I think we're going to go through these various phases, but for many, many years, the demand will be much higher. Just like what we're seeing with GPUs, it's going to be many years before, you know,
the demand is
anything catches
met.
up.
Yes, right. So that leads us back to the original question, which is what percent likelihood in your head do they start shipping to third parties by 2020 in quantity by 2026?
Not in quantity. I think they'll be in testing, maybe larger quantities in testing, but that's what I would see in 2026. Remember, they're gonna finalize this design, that hand we saw at Re-Robot, and they're gonna get that into production at some point in 2025. And then they'll have a production plan for that version of Optimus. Maybe it's 100,000, and then at end of lives, EOL. And then they'll in the background, they're going to be doing their development cycle for the next Optimus. What are the learnings? What do we learn in the Tesla factory? What are the limitations? What are the reliability issues? What are the top things that we repair? What's the cost per repair? Do we have to change access on things? So there's going to be a lot they learn. So it would behoove Tesla to not um, step on the accelerator on this first version of Optimus, because it could get really expensive, especially if they find a big problem.
Mhm.
That's one of the challenges with new technology too, is like having some huge ramp in the beginning, and then you find a problem, and then the cost to recover that could be many billions of dollars. So I think they're going to be pretty careful about the ramp. But once they've figured it out and they've got really good data from their factories, it'll probably be that Optimus version 2 or 3 that they'll really start putting significant volume behind. And the supply chain will have the ability to catch up too.
So then the number you threw out was 100,000. Is that a number you could imagine in 2026?
In 2026, I would be closer to it's possible. I'd be on the high end. I'd be more of in the 30, big wide number, a big 30 to 100K range for
Okay.
2026.
All right. Okay, we'll hold you to that. So, switching to politics, sort of. Let's call it switching to government, because the government is certainly involved in every aspect of business. The cabinet is getting flushed out really fast. The details of the top priorities that Mr. Trump has in mind are getting laid out almost every day in these 3-minute clips. Elon and Vivek are already setting up shop for the Doge Commission with a brand on X already being established. How are you feeling about the first week of the transition and the picks so far?
Yeah, I mean, he was at the White House today, president-elect, and it was all smiles, great meeting, and it was good. It's good to see, that kind of transition. And in the first week, he's named pretty much most of the top cabinet positions and many smaller ones as well. So you can see that they had a very experienced transition team as well behind this, and they've been working in the background. Obviously, they've been a little bit superstitious about if we win, but you can tell they're moving quickly. Now, a number of these picks have to go through Senate confirmation. And I would say maybe a little bit of a setback on that today in terms of Senate leadership, but not horrible. I mean, we're talking, well, we'll see how it works out. But anyway, these things have to go through confirmation, but I think he's made a lot of progress in just a week. I think for Tesla, I mean, again, it's interesting. I was thinking about this today on a drive. Elon may go in and say how much money, for example, I've quoted this number several times that the Department of Energy LPO office, limited this office that's doing the program loans for clean energy.
Right.
I want to say that they pushed out 20 to 30 billion dollars in conditional loans for the automakers to
Yeah.
retrofit their factories for
Yeah.
EV.
Yeah.
So that's going to be put in front of Elon. And a lot of these are still in conditional form. Some have been accepted, some haven't. Some have taken the money, like for Blue Oval, for Ford, and like, well, where's the factory? I think I think it's going to be ironic for people because I think you're going to see Elon. He's on the record. I have this clip as well. When he was being asked by a Wall Street Journal reporter, like, do you think, EV charging stations need subsidies? He goes, no, kill it. We don't do, he goes, are we doing subsidies to build gas stations? Well, no, then just kill it. And so I think one of the surprising things that people are going to see is that everybody thinks, like, especially if you're not for this administration, you're thinking every bad thing in the world. You think Elon's going to go in there and literally start, like, funneling money to like Tesla. Like, no, I think he's going to do the exact opposite. I think the EV industry, the auto industry is going to be told, look, you need to survive. Like, we're going to help you on the tariff side, but we're not going to just, shovel good money after bad. And the ROIs have been terrible on these, and by the way, there's billions of dollars in grants and money that have gone to the auto industry. Stellantis, Ford, GM. By the way, not Tesla.
Right.
Tesla has participated in some of the charging bids,
Right.
but in terms of like these big multi-billion dollar grants or loans, they don't have them. So I think ironically, Elon's going to come in and I think what's going to be very strange to the public is I think he's going to kill a lot of call it company subsidies, not so much the emissions credits. These are different things. I think he's actually going to go in and kill these loans to auto companies. Like, look, like, you have cash. Do your EV transition.
Yeah. Right. Well, you mentioned also tariffs in there. So I really wanted to talk to you about tariffs today. So I'm
Yeah.
going to put you in the C-suite of any of the companies that you've been working with over the years. And you've just found out that your product that's now made in China, or pick any country, pick Europe, I don't care, and your main customer base, maybe the United States, is now going to dramatically increase tariffs. What happens in the C-suite? What do you guys do? Do you just say, oh, I have a 30% increase. I'm going to pass that along. to my first buyer, and that first buyer will pass that along to retail, and we'll see whether or not retail accepts it, or are there
Yeah.
alternatives to that strategy,
Yeah.
which
And you
everybody
know, and
seems
I
to think
know
is
that,
the
yeah, that's not how it works. And yeah, I've done distribution in 150 countries, and I was always baffled. And this was pre 2017 and pre the Trump administration, where he really amped up these tariffs. And I was always surprised at how awful we were hassled to get our products into these other countries. The things I had to do to get product into Brazil or Argentina, I had to build it. Then I had to take it down and do semi knockdown and then send them in as kits and rebuild them up in their country. Like they were making me do additional work that was not first principles based. And in terms of the total, supply chain network was a much more expensive product to build as a result, but they were protecting their workforce. They did not want all these other countries coming in and dumping their products. So I'm like, every other country, there was so many dozens of countries in the world were protecting themselves from U.S. manufacturing and imports. And here we were just wide open. We'd take anything
right.
that anybody wants to dump in. So I was always dumbfounded by that. So yeah, so I am getting these phone calls from call it small companies, medium, and then there are a couple mega caps that are, they're really looking at readjusting their strategy. And by the way, they've been looking at this for a number of years. There's been the China Taiwan risk. There's been a number of different kind of war game scenarios that have been going on the last couple of years. So it's not like they just started on November 5th, but I
Right.
will tell you that a lot of the activity did pick up last week in terms of execution. So what these countries have to do is they have to figure out how to diversify but not leave China. Um, because China is going to they're going to massively incentivize manufacturing in their country, and they're going to massively penalize you if you move out wholesale. And there's a lot of reasons to manufacture. If you're already set up in China, there's a lot of reasons to continue.
Right.
But you should be diversified, and I think there should be a couple of stages of diversification depending on your product line. End state should be, it's like you should look at where your sales are and try to figure out if you can get as close to your point of sale as possible in terms of your supply network. That's going to help you out in the long run. But it's not that China's supply chain won't work in the US. You've got to redesign how your products are made. You've got to redesign your supply chain. You've got to figure out how to to really drive out cost and drive out complexity of your product. So, but the first stage, initial stage should be is you should have some diversification, whether it's Vietnam, whether it's India, whether it's Thailand, whether it's South Korea. There's many free trade lanes that could be worked with, um, and you should have that at a minimum. But if you have a tremendous amount of sales in the U.S., like you should be considering figuring that out.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are there's just a lot of bad information. And I'll leave it with
Yeah.
in 2013, I commissioned a factory in the United States that had 5 million units a year of smartphone manufacturing. And a lot of people thought like, well, how do you do that? Like, it's impossible. You can't do that. It costs too much. China, like, no, it's very possible, but it's not the same supply chain that you cut and paste. You really have to design for your localization scheme and where you're building. So that call's coming in. There's not one size fits all answer for everyone, but and by the way, I think the Trump administration is their goal is not to set the world on fire. Their goal is to get some really good deals
Yeah.
going on the trade side.
Yeah. And one of their goals is to make money from the taxes. And if you if you put a tariff that's so high that the product can no longer be shipped, then you don't make any money in the taxes because there's no action, there's no activity.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's
Right.
not good.
Right.
Um,
And it's not the consumer that bears all that. That's baloney.
yes, totally.
That's never the case.
It's
Um,
like grade school thinking about how tariffs work. It's not even the first year of business school thinking.
right.
It's grade school thinking.
Right.
Um, Okay, so one last thought, I think, because we're going to run out of time here, and that is the Doge Commission is looking for us to help them figure out where the problems are in the economy, where there's places that we can eliminate costs. I'm going to give you a quick story, and then I want to know if you have other stories like this. I was selling 1 million water bottles a year to the U.S. Army, as the bottles were being used to help recruit, new members into the armed forces. It was a lovely piece of business. And then all of a sudden I lost the bid. I didn't lose the bid because my price was too high. I lost the bid because it was a company that employed blind workers. And so that $1 million order now costs the U.S. government $1,100,000. Are there other things like that you've run into over the years dealing with the government, which is like whether it's set asides for blind or hard of hearing, or for people of color, or for women, or for old people? I don't know. Or just other stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean there's definitely easy stuff like that, but I mean, this is why I work with companies on their product cost structure and what are the systems and tools that you can do. And it's not rocket science. But there are methods to this, and there's real systemic methods. You can come in and completely transform the cost structure of a company and their product cost structure. And companies are very interested in this. There's consulting firms, the big ones like McKinsey, PwC, that they have modules on this that they sell in and so forth. But long story short, I've heard the conversations and it's very interesting. Some people get on TV and they try to simplify it and say, well, Social Security and Medicare are $5 trillion themselves. So they can't do anything about that. Wrong. Wrong. There are people that are administrating those services. There are indirect procurement involved. There's direct procurement involved. Everything that has a head count in the government is in play. Every piece of indirect service or indirect device that's purchased to execute a service in the government is in play. Every physical, like your water bottle example, every physical thing in the U.S. government, that's in play. And there are methods to figure out what should you pay for something you buy relative to its core cost structure and what is a fair gross margin for the other side to get. But I think they're going to start with a even more simplistic approach of like, should we ever even be buying this thing?
Right.
Should we be buying the water bottle?
Right.
And then once they get through that and they figure out, okay, this is the stuff we want to buy. Here are the services. Here are the goods. Okay. And then here are the government functions we want to have. All right. Now, how many people are needed to administer this? And what should we be paying for these services? And there are really good hardened professionals in supply chain and other businesses that can really help the government. I think Tesla is known in the industry of having a very good approach to both fair management with their suppliers on costs, but also very systemic. And anyway, so I think people are in for a rude awakening, and they think that things are hands off that there really aren't. And I think it's not so much the verticals that Elon and Vivek are going to approach, but it's going to be the approach. It's going to be the horizontals. It's going to be like, all right, how do we do should costing across everything we buy? How do we do efficient headcount? Like how do we look at layers and spans and headcount? And it's going to be fun. I hope they get a really good team of people under them, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think you've just hit it out of the park. I think it's going to be headcount and procurement is going to be kind of the direction that they go.
Productivity.
There may be entire departments like the Department of Education that just get completely taken out, but otherwise it'll be across everything. It's productivity. Bringing the overall cost of whatever it is that you're doing, whether that's mailing out a Social Security check or whether that is helping, improve the city somewhere in the United States that is in real trouble, or a water system or whatever. I think it'll just be headcount and procurement. That's my theory as well. All right. Hey, it's been great having you on as always. We will take a little pause here and get into the numbers in a little while. So Jeff. perfect. A home
Yep.
run day, man. Way to go. I liked it. Every bit of it.
So long.
Talk to you later. Before I get into those numbers, I did want to cover one more story that we just didn't have time to get to. David Rosenberg writes today that he says, I feel sorry for Donald Trump because just like George Bush in 2000, he's coming into office at the peak of a massive price bubble in the equity market. I wouldn't call it a price bubble, and it's certainly not like the price bubble of the 1990s, but it's still a significant. Well, anyway, he goes on to say, whether you look at the valuations of the current market in terms of price to earnings ratio, price to sales ratio, price to book, the smooth CAPE or the Buffett indicator, the S&P 500 is simply off the charts. Now, I've been talking about this for months. Now, he says, call it a 2 standard deviation event and the top 5% of excess valuations in recorded history. The equity risk premium being close to zero means that the stock market investors are overtly throwing caution to the wind, willingly, even blindly taking on equity risk and not getting compensated for it. So what I wanted to ask Jeff, if I'd had time, was whether he also thinks that the markets are stretched, or are we in a completely new world? And my thinking, as you may have heard before, while I think that there's plenty of opportunity for a pullback, and that pullback might even be a benefit to the overall long-term market, because sometimes you need that pullback in order to get the next set of growth. Whether or not we have that pullback, the productivity thing is going to be off the charts compared to any time in history. We have a dramatic amount of pent-up demand, in particular for the refrigerators. If you follow the channel, I just refer to it as the refrigerators. There's this pent-up demand at Home Depot. People have been holding back spending at Home Depot, as they pointed out the other day. Then you have the demographic shift, and this demographic shift, very few people pay any attention to. That's why you listen to this channel, because I watch it for you. But the demographic shift is not insignificant. The aging population of the United States and the world, for that matter, the different ways that old people like me, or maybe you, the way we purchase versus how younger people purchase, we're not buying as many refrigerators. Quite frankly, that's just a fact. And we're spending the money on experience, on travel, on things of that nature. So it's a completely different buying experience. Well, what happens if you don't need to buy a bigger and bigger refrigerator? You don't need to buy more and more beds and things for little kids as they're growing up, and you are in that part of your life where you have this excess money. Well, you got to invest it. Now, you might just invest it into something straightforward, like T-bills or whatever, or have a pension fund, or some kind of an instrument that just takes care of it for you. But some people are being a little more aggressive and are interested in deciding where they can make the best return on their investment. And there's just a lot of folks out there like that. And so I think that there's a lot more money coming into these financial instruments than we've seen in the past, or into all the assets, than we've seen in the past. Anyway, I wanted to bring that up. Maybe next week I'll ask Jeff about it. Maybe I'll ask some other people about it. But I do think we're seeing a shift, an actual tectonic shift in the economy it doesn't mean that there's never going to be a recession. It doesn't mean there's never going to be a sell-off, another bear market. It just means things are different. And I think we're going to have to pay attention to those differences as we go forward, even as, of course, the new administration is going to be attacking the government issue in a very different way. Anyway, I'm going to do the numbers. Well, actually, are the numbers out now? Maybe I can go ahead and do them. Let me take a quick look. I think we've got them. Let's go. Let's start with where Tesla is in the after hours. Tesla is sitting at up 63. It's been up more than that. For the day, it was up $1.75. It was also up at one point like 14, went down negative into the red, and then popped back up to 175 at the end, and now up a half a buck or so. The overall market, the Dow was up 47 points. The NASDAQ was down 50. S&P was up 1.3. Let's call it even, almost even. The Magnificent Seven was just about as mixed as you can possibly ever want to see it. And the Cathie Woods ended up mostly down for the day. Why? Oh, because of those bonds. Yeah, the bonds decided that they were not going to stay down. And so what we had was we had a pop today and ended up 1.8 basis points on the 10-year to 4.451. And we've heard some screaming out there about that. This is not the direction we want to see the bonds going in. We've got the oil down. It's sitting at 68. So that overall for the economy, that's a good thing. Brent sitting at 72. Natural gas broke through 3 earlier today. But it's back down at $2.98 right now. So that is what happened to gold. It was down 27.90. Silver down 1.15%, almost back down to 30 at this point. Copper down a bit as well, almost looking like it might go back under 4. So that's kind of an interesting set of things. And then we've got Bitcoin at about $120 up. But 89,806 after being well up, 92 plus earlier today. So we have to wait a little while here to get the rest of the pre-market. So I'm going to go on pause, and I will come back and give you the rest of the pre-market in a few minutes. Now, just before we go to the equities for tomorrow morning, or for the pre-market right now, let me just talk about it, and also we'll take one last look at where Tesla is. Let me just mention one more time. It is now the time. I just went into a greeting card company earlier today. The entire place looks like Christmas. So you got to start thinking about Christmas now. And that means you really should start looking at the Cybertruck bottle opener, which is an amazing Christmas gift for under $26. Okay, it's $25 for one. But as soon as you buy 2 or more, you're well under $25. So take a look at the information below, and you too could be giving away an amazing gift this year for all the different holiday purposes that you might be faced with, including, your customers. That sometimes $25 is the limit, and so there you go. You've got the perfect gift for handing out to customers. All right, so let's get back to the where we are on equities going into tomorrow. And that would be right now, we've got the Dow sitting up a little bit, 17 or 0.04%. The S&P flat. And the NASDAQ almost flat, down 850. So we're not going to get much of a reading from that with regard to what to expect in the morning. But let's go back one last time, as I mentioned, see what's happened in the last about 40 minutes since I did the wrap earlier, and see if Tesla has moved since then. Tesla in the after hours now actually down just a tad, 24 cents. So not a lot of action there, not a lot of predictability about what we're going to see in the morning. All right, let's see what do we got later on tonight. Brian White, my new time, putting on the midday show at night instead of in the middle of the day. So far it's working. So Brian White will be along at about 8 o'clock California time. Very outstanding and interesting show that we put together on Monday. Very still timely. Nothing there that had any kind of a timeliness problem on it. And tomorrow morning, CERN Basher. I want to say tomorrow morning. No, actually, now it will be tomorrow night for CERN Basher. Tomorrow morning, of course, we have the regular After the Bell show. So be sure and look that up as well. All right, that's all I got for you right now. It has been great talking to you.